Today, we're zeroing in on the Horn of Africa. It's a region that's hugely strategic, a real tapestry of old rivalries, new diplomacy, economic drives, and frankly, deep human struggle. We've got a stack of recent sources, articles, reports, you name it. Our goal, to sift through it all, pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts, and help you get a handle on what's really shaping this vital area. Okay, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. And the range of these sources is quite something. We're seeing everything from, deadly clashes and complex trade talks right down to humanitarian crises that often fly under the radar. What's really striking, I think, is how things that seem totally separate are actually deeply linked. It's like this global chessboard where local moves can send ripples internationally.
Right. Let's start on the ground then, in Puntland, Somalia. It seems the region's caught between, external threats and some serious internal problems. We saw reports that on August 23rd, there was heavy fighting in Puntland's Balad Valley. At least 20 Puntland soldiers were killed, over 30 wounded, clashing with ISIS-linked militants. That's one of the deadliest incidents in months, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it really shows that ISIS is, still very much a presence in northern Somalia. Puntland forces are actually still surrounding a place called Marigatawal. That's where ISIS fighters and their families are apparently trapped. So it suggests this is a pretty significant ongoing operation trying to root them out.
A major push, then.
Seems like it. Military officials hope that by taking key ISIS strongholds, they can dismantle the group's network there. The U.S. is even involved, providing air support. But security analysts are still cautious. They warn ISIS is actively trying to carve out what they call a geopolitical foothold, basically a strategic base for influence in the region. It's all part of this bigger offensive, Operation Lightning, hitting camps and supply lines they've had since around 2015.
So a serious counter-ISIS effort, but it sounds like the fight is far from over. And as you mentioned, Puntland has problems from within too. There's this critical internal challenge: mutinous soldiers. Apparently, citing unpaid salaries, they've blocked key trade routes from Bosaso port for nearly 10 days now.
That's right. And the impact is huge. Hundreds of cargo trucks full of essential goods are just stranded.
Which means worries about food spoiling, prices going up, massive economic losses.
Exactly. And it gets more complicated. Reports suggest local elders might be backing the troops while officials are blaming them for stirring up trouble. It really throws a spotlight on deeper problems, doesn't it? Unpaid soldiers, weak government oversight, those ongoing tensions between local clans and the Puntland authorities. It's basically a governance crisis, hitting trade hard and making people really frustrated. Sets a very volatile scene for everything else happening.
That internal fragility, it feels like it leads us straight into the next big issue. The whole debate around Somaliland's push for international recognition. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz recently called for recognizing Somaliland, which predictably caused quite a stir. Mogadishu immediately warned against any destabilizing gestures.
Yeah, and looking wider, China jumped in very quickly to condemn Cruz's idea. They framed it as, interfering in Somalia's internal affairs. Beijing even drew a direct line to Taiwan, saying both fall under sovereignty principles China defends.
Interesting parallel.
But then Somaliland and Taiwan pushed back. They described their relationship as a partnership between democracies and rejected what they called Beijing's coercive language.
So the stakes here aren't just political, they're deeply strategic, right? Somaliland's been really playing up the value of its Berbera port, highlighting its location for trade, military potential, especially with the U.S. and China competing nearby in Djibouti and the Red Sea.
Absolutely. That geostrategic value is key. There were even reports, suggesting Somaliland offered the U.S. a military base near the Red Sea, plus access to minerals in return for recognition.
Wow. And then, quite remarkably, Somaliland's President Iro publicly endorsed former President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, praising his efforts, apparently, to raise Somaliland's profile internationally and linking it to global peace. It's quite the diplomatic maneuver.
So what are the potential downsides? What are the risks if, say, the U.S. did recognize Somaliland?
Well, that's the crucial question. Connie Torin, who used to be Turkey's ambassador to Somalia, warned it could just fuel clan divisions. He argued there's no fundamental difference, ethnicity, religion, language between Somaliland and the rest of Somalia, apart from clan politics and the federal structure. His suggestion was to strengthen Somalia's federal system instead.
Okay.
And similarly, former U.S. Ambassador Larry Andre cautioned that rushing into recognition could destabilize the Horn and actually harm U.S. interests. He recommended maybe a liaison office first under the existing embassy in Mogadishu.
So caution from experienced diplomats. And Turkey itself seems to be walking a fine line here. Turkey's current ambassador met with Sultan Abubakar Wabar, and he's a key leader of the Gadabursi clan, which opposes Somaliland's independence.
Right, and Somaliland's foreign ministry immediately condemned that meeting as unacceptable interference, demanding an explanation from Turkey.
Which must complicate things further, especially after Somalia's defense minister posted on X, formerly Twitter, something like, "The time for Awdal has come." Awdal being a region within Somaliland where the Gadabursis are prominent.
Exactly. It just shows how layered it all is. External actors trying to engage can easily, maybe unintentionally, stir up these deep-seated local divisions.
These regional tensions also played out in that really interesting incident with the Turkish ship, the MBC World. Puntland's maritime police seized it back in July near Ras Kaysir, said it was maneuvering suspiciously. Turned out it was carrying military supplies for Somalia's army.
Yeah, and it was held for 2 weeks. Mogadishu called it piracy, which obviously ramped up the existing friction between the federal government and Puntland.
So how did it get resolved?
Well, the ship was released on August 4th, but only after some intense talks involving Turkey and, interestingly, the UAE, which is a close ally of Puntland. Turkey apparently had to show conclusive evidence it owned the cargo. The whole episode really highlighted worries about arms flows in the region, especially since the UN lifted Somalia's big arms embargo back in December 2023.
Right, the timing.
And that specific shipment was apparently quite critical for Turpsum, that's Turkey's military base in Mogadishu. They train the Gorgor commandos, the ones leading major fights against al-Shabaab.
And these internal conflicts, the arms flows, it creates openings for groups like al-Shabaab, doesn't it?
Precisely. The al-Qaeda-linked group is actively exploiting all this instability, the fights between the federal government and states, the inter-clan clashes. They're expanding in southern Somalia. Reports say they now hold more territory than they have since 2016. They're controlling trade routes, setting up their own shadow governance.
So they're capitalizing on the chaos.
Very much so. And you see Somalia's ghetto region turning into a kind of proxy battleground. You've got clan politics, ambitions from the Jubaland state, and Ethiopian interventions all colliding there. Ethiopian troops were even accused of attacking Somali army positions in Dalo late last year, and there were reports Ethiopia is actively backing Jubaland forces.
Why? As a buffer.
Exactly. A buffer against al-Shabaab, but maybe also against Mogadishu's federal authority. This follows the collapse of talks where Ethiopia was seeking sea access talks failed over who controls the ports. So Ethiopia seems to be trying to secure its border and perhaps dilute Mogadishu's power. But a major consequence is that it pushes thousands of displaced people into Kenya and Ethiopia.
And Kenya feels that directly. We saw Kenyan officials raising the alarm about fighting in ghettos spilling over into their Mandera County, stray bullets, explosives crossing the border. Kenyan legislators even warned Jubaland fighters had briefly entered Kenyan territory, calling it a severe security threat.
It really underscores how Somalia's internal fragmentation, fueled by outside interests, creates instability that doesn't respect borders. It directly impacts neighbors with violence.
Okay, let's pivot now to Kenya itself, a major regional player actively diversifying its economy and partnerships. First up, Kenya and the U.S. have started talks for a new trade agreement. This is pretty urgent because the AGOA framework, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, expires soon, September 2025.
Right. AGOA gives duty-free access to the U.S. market for many African countries. It's been huge for Kenya, especially textiles, flowers, agriculture.
And they're already facing a 10% U.S. tariff imposed back in April. So securing stable, long-term access is vital for their exporters.
It is. And you see the geopolitics here, too. The U.S. wants a stronger, maybe more balanced partnership, recognizing Kenya's strategic role in African trade. Meanwhile, Kenya's acting fast to protect its exports from these tariff shocks, shows real agility in navigating, global economic shifts.
And the U.S. isn't the only major player. China's role in Kenya is also evolving, particularly around debt. Kenya is negotiating with China to convert some of its dollar debt into Chinese yuan. The big focus seems to be the $5 billion loan for the standard gauge railway.
Yeah, that's a really significant potential shift. The idea is to cut debt servicing costs. Global interest rates are up, the US dollar is strong, making dollar debt more expensive to repay. Kenya pays nearly $1 billion a year just to service its Chinese debt. That's like 25% of its total foreign debt payments for this fiscal year.
A huge chunk.
It is. So switching some of that to yuan could mean lower interest rates. It's a proactive, quite pragmatic move by Kenya to manage its financial risk in this, uncertain global economy, hedging their bets, basically.
Makes sense. And separate from these big economic moves, there was also that legal settlement with the UK. The UK government agreed to pay $2.9 million to over 7,700 Kenyans affected by that fire caused by a British military exercise back in 2021 at Loldaiga Conservancy.
Right, that fire destroyed thousands of acres, hit wildlife, caused health issues. It was one of the biggest group claims against the UK military in East Africa. Though, it's worth noting the UK didn't formally accept liability for the fire itself.
Still, a significant settlement. It shows Kenya's engaging on multiple fronts with different global partners.
Absolutely. What you see is a clear strategy of multilateralism. Kenya's balancing ties with the US, China, the UK, others, trying to maximize advantages and hedge risks. Very dynamic diplomacy.
And Kenya's economic influence is reaching outwards too. Their biggest bank, KCB Group, is looking to enter Ethiopia's banking sector.
Yes, this follows Ethiopia finally opening up its banking sector to foreign players in June 2025. KCB is reportedly in talks to buy up to a 40% stake in an Ethiopian bank.
A big move for KCB.
It is, and it fits their regional strategy. Their subsidiaries outside Kenya already bring in over a third of their profits. This move really helps position Nairobi as a potential regional financial hub, and it builds on existing links like Ethiopia already selling Kenya significant amounts of electricity under a long-term deal. You're seeing real economic integration happening.
Interesting. Now, while Ethiopia opens its financial doors, it's also seeing this incredible boom in gold, particularly in Tigray. The National Bank branch in Shire, Tigray, reported getting 19 tons of gold over the past year. That's nearly 80 times the previous volume.
It's an extraordinary surge. Nationally, gold deliveries hit 39 tons, bringing in something like USD 3.45 billion in exports for 2024-25. That's about 9 times higher than the year before.
Wow. What's driving that?
Officials point to currency reforms and higher prices paid by the government, basically drawing gold out of the black market and into formal channels. And it's a big bet, there are serious concerns. Reports of adulterated gold, weak controls. The Tigray administration has even launched an investigation.
So a double-edged sword.
Very much so. You've got this potential resource boom, but it comes with huge risks: smuggling, shady border deals, maybe money laundering. It's a major test for Ethiopia, trying to manage this resource sustainably, especially in Tigray, which is still fragile after the conflict.
And that fragility is starkly clear when you contrast the gold boom with the humanitarian situation in the very same region. Despite the 2022 ceasefire, Tigray is facing drought, hunger, and tragically, a wave of young people trying to migrate out. In one district, Slumti, nearly 50,000 people are facing hunger, thousands of livestock dead. Youth unemployment is so high that many feel they have no future there.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. They end up taking incredibly dangerous routes towards the Gulf of Aden and Yemen, often falling prey to traffickers.
So this massive potential wealth from gold isn't reaching the people most in need, who are simultaneously hit by drought and lack of opportunity.
It's a profound irony. It really highlights the disconnect between potential macroeconomic gains and the reality of localized suffering, especially when layered with climate shocks in the aftermath of war.
Let's shift now to Sudan. The reports coming out of there are just catastrophic, particularly from El Fasher. The UN keeps warning about conditions there. The conflict between the army, SAF, and the paramilitary RSF has basically split the city and the country. Famine was declared in nearby camps last year.
And the World Food Program says thousands trapped in the city are at risk. Food prices up 460% compared to elsewhere. It's staggering.
And the health impact. 40% of young children in El Fasher acutely malnourished. A health official reported 63 deaths in just 1 week, mostly women and children.
Yeah.
Plus cholera, claiming over 1,000 lives this year alone.
The sheer difficulty of getting aid in is just immense. A WFP food convoy in Darfur was attacked just recently, August 20th. 3 trucks damaged, set on fire.
Unbelievable.
And both sides, the RSF and the SF, they blame each other for blocking aid. It intensifies the danger for humanitarian workers and essentially weaponizes aid, trapping civilians.
Amidst this disaster, there are international attempts to engage. But it sounds very complicated. Sudan's military leader, General al-Burhan, did a reshuffle, putting allied armed groups under his direct command. This was around the time he met a US-Africa advisor in Switzerland.
Right. Talks about a transition to civilian rule, ceasefire, aid. Reports suggested the RSF leader, Hemeti, was also in Switzerland for meetings.
But does any of that feel realistic on the ground?
Well, there are deep concerns. The growing influence of Islamist groups within the SAF structure, for one. And the RSF has basically set up its own parallel government. Fears of a permanent split are very real. It really raises questions about the legitimacy of any deal struck while the military holds power. And then you have other actors involved, like Pakistan signing a $1.5 billion defense deal with Sudan's army.
Supplying aircraft, drones.
Exactly, which could shift the military balance and potentially runs counter to Western sanctions. It's a complex web of interests playing out amidst a humanitarian nightmare.
And within that nightmare, there are these specific, often hidden crises, like period poverty among Sudanese refugees in Uganda. Nearly 40,000 women and girls who fled the war are facing this. They lack access to sanitary products, rely on makeshift, unsafe methods, increasing infection risks.
And it's compounded by the prevalence of FGM, female genital mutilation, which affects a staggering 87% of women aged 15-49 in that population, adding another layer of health challenges.
But there's some hope there, right? A grassroots initiative.
Yes, absolutely. It's quite inspiring. Two Sudanese activists, Marwa Taj Eldin and Fida Ashraf, founded Red Card. They distribute reusable pads and provide menstrual health education in the refugee camps. They've reached thousands of women already, even using Starlink internet for virtual training in remote spots. It's amazing ingenuity.
That's incredible.
It is, but they face huge hurdles: customs duties on the pads, transport costs, social stigma around menstruation, and a major funding gap, over $50,000. It really shines a light on how war, displacement, gender inequality, and healthcare gaps all intersect in these devastating, very personal ways.
We've mentioned health crises throughout, and one factor hitting Somalia hard seems to be a drop in foreign aid, specifically from the U.S. U.S. aid commitments reportedly plunged from $765 million in 2024 down to $149 million for the 2025 fiscal year. That's a massive cut.
It is, and Somalia health officials are drawing a direct line between these cuts and a rise in diphtheria cases. Over 1,600 infections, 87 deaths so far this year, way up from all of last year. They say the funding cuts have led to vaccine shortages, health centers closing, mobile vaccination teams being suspended. Aid groups like Save the Children are reporting hundreds of clinics shut down, and a rise in other infectious diseases too.
So a direct, measurable, negative health impact from aid reduction.
A stark reminder, really, of the immediate, sometimes life and death consequences when international aid priorities shift.
So after digging through all this, what's the big picture? What does it all mean for you, the learner, trying to connect these dots? Our deep dive today really shows the Horn of Africa as a kind of microcosm of global challenges, doesn't it? You've got everything from soldiers not getting paid and people facing famine right up to high-level trade deals, debt negotiations, and the strategic games of major powers. Every piece seems connected.
It really does, and it absolutely demands a nuanced view. You can't look at the humanitarian needs without considering climate change, or the rise of groups like Al-Shabaab without seeing the state fragility, or the resource competition without understanding the geopolitics. It's all interwoven. The future of this region is being shaped right now with incredibly high, very human stakes involved. And the ripples, as we said at the start, they often spread far beyond the region itself.
Which leaves us with a final, perhaps provocative thought to mull over. We see so much external engagement in the Horn: military aid, trade deals, infrastructure, humanitarian help, diplomatic pressure, all sorts. Does all this varied international attention actually foster genuine stability and self-determination for the people of the Horn? Or could it, maybe inadvertently, end up entrenching the very conflicts and dependencies it claims it wants to solve? It's a critical question, I think, for understanding the forces at play, not just there, but in many parts of our world today.